Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Machiavelli's Prince. Today we're on the penultimate chapter of the Prince, chapter 25. This is the last chapter of from 20 to 25, which deal with the question 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Last six chapters, which deal with the question of prudence and prudence of the Prince. And he ends on the last chapter with the question of we shouldn't blame. The last chapter ended in saying that we should not princes, these princes who have been born princes should not accuse fortune when they lose their principate. They shouldn't blame fortune in the role of fortune as an actor has been brought up, and this is the transition into this chapter about the role of fortune, how much fortune is able to do in human things, and in what mode one may oppose her. So this is the question. This becomes the question of fortune. This is chapter on fortune, the fortune, and how much function fortune has. Now, what previous accounts discussions of fortune was that really it's the best you can get into power because of it, but that's not good. The good wise prince should only use fortune as providing you with the occasion, the time, the moment that you can utilize your virtue. Right, that's the best situation. But otherwise, once you get it because of fortune of others, then you this is more difficult to hold it back. This is going back all the way to the first chapters of the Prince, first around chapters 4 and 5, right? So now let us turn now to the question here. It is, and it is not unknown to me. It is not unknown to me how many have had and still have the opinion that because the things of the world are in a mode governed by fortune and by God, that men with their prudence are unable to correct them. Indeed, that they have no remedy. So therefore, most people believe in what? That is, fortune and God controls everything, and that men with their prudence are unable to correct them. And indeed, they have no remedy. And because of this, they judge that it does not. They judge that it does not do to sweat much over things, but to let them be governed by chance. So, since we don't have no power, we might as well just not worry about these things and let chance dictate it. Okay, this is this view. This view is not unknown to me that many have had and still have the opinion that basically that we have no control over things, that we're governed by God or by chance, fortune, and therefore because of imprudence can unable to correct them. In fact, have no remedy. So it's best. This is very much a kind of Islamic attitude. Don't worry about it. God wills it. God wills it. God wills it. We just, this happens. Like, oh no, God wills it. Uh, this kind of idea that don't sweat it. God just wills it. Just accept it, man. Submission is what Muslim means, right? To submit, right? Just submit to the will of the divine. The fortune, chance. Um, and because they judge that it does not much sweat over things, but to let them be governed by chance, right? So this opinion has this opinion has been believed more in our time because of the great changes in things which have been seen and may be seen every day beyond any human conjecture. So there was this belief that chance. Now he's talking about his time that all of a sudden these forces, outside forces, popped in, and that really altered the reality of the moment. And we see the same thing in like 2020 because of COVID. COVID, something from the question then is, was that really chance, accident, or was that really something that was intended? Okay, that's the whole point, right? Was it? But we saw it. We in fact, what Machiavelli says about his times is equally true in our times. That there's been these great things of forces and factors that look like factors of chance or accident, or things beyond inevitabilities that are just happening that we cannot change. No human action can change it. Oh my God, we got all this immigration and we can't stop it. Oh, in other words, so the question then becomes, um, and because the situation, we believe that there's no way, human prudence cannot solve our problems. We have no power over them. And this is why our modern times is more belief that we have powerless on this aspect, right? We're and thinking about this, I am myself sometimes, and in some part, inclined to their opinion. Though he's saying, so I'm sometimes inclined to their opinion, right? That is that we have no chart. These forces of outside forces and things are just so powerful, and that the situation has nothing to do with it. Nevertheless, right? In order that our free will not be extinguished, I judge that it could be true that fortune is the that I will not allow our free will to be extinguished. I judge that it could be true that fortune is the arbiter of half our actions, but that she lets the other half, or nearly that, be governed by us. So, what was done by God and fortune? God and fortune, fortune becomes a God, and God becomes fortune. And therefore, this is an outside force, that it's that. And therefore, free will, it's half of our actions here. But he grants the fortune, but God drops out of the equation, right? Because fortune has become God, and God has become fortune in this weird action. I will judge it true that the arbiter of half our actions, but that she lets the other half, or nearly that, be governed by us. So that half our actions, but nearly half, okay, not necessarily perfectly half, but mostly half, be governed by us. Now, okay, so therefore half, right? Half, or nearly half, is ours, our power. This is what he says. Nevertheless, he believes, he's inclined to believe this, but then this is what he asserts. And then I liken her to one of those violent rivers, which, when they become angry, flood the plain, destroys the trees and buildings, remove the earth from one place and deposit it to another. Everyone flees their advance. Everyone surrenders to their impetus, surrenders to their impetus, unable to oppose it in any way. So it's like a river, a violent river that just fortune as a river, right? It's a violent river that it floods its blank, does it like this, and he says, okay, unable to oppose it. And although these things are so, if it does not follow that men, when there are quiet times, right? Times cannot therefore make provisions with the fences and embankments in such a mode that later rising, either they go through a canal, or their impetus would not be so licentiously and violently, or so harmful. So what does he say here? That first he says fortune is like a river. Fortune is like this big violent river that destroys everything. But well, if when it's not doing those things in more quieter times, you can prepare. You can build embankments. You can make canals. You can do things so that when the bad times come, the river is violent, but it's what it will just what it will rise, but then go through a canal. or this impetus would not be so powerful, doing all those horrible things that he says they did. In other words, you can control her effects. You can't stop fortune from doing something at the time, but you can control the effects of it. So you can't control it and not do. In other words, you can't decide it will do or not do, but you can control its impact on you, its effects on you, and what you want. Right? The same happens with fortune, who demonstrates her power when there is no ordered virtue to resist her. So, in other words, fortune only has power over no ordered virtue. If you have ordered virtue, you are kind of able not to be impacted by fortune in the same way, have the impact on it, and you'll be impacted on it, but not as devastatingly so. I mean, or perhaps not. And you're ordered virtue able to resist her, and she turns her impetus where she knows embankments and defenses to hold her have not been built. In other words, she will then all the forces, the people who have not prepared, who are not ready, who are not strong, they will get the worst impact of it. You will get affected, but you will survive, and you maybe even endure. And this is another U. Let's see what the U here is. This is the courteous one. This is not. This is the considerata inventa. Considerata, the courteous one, right? And if you, this is the courteous one. This is the formal. If you consider Italy, remember the previous two chapters before. Consider Italy, which is the seed of these changes, and the one which put them into motion. You will see her to be a country without embankments, without defenses, any defenses. Stop. So Italy had no embankments, no preparations, no preparations, no preparations. There were no embankments. So Italy is the cause of the great changes that are happening globally at this time. Is because of this, and it happened here because Italy had these changes, this motion, these are things because they did not have any what. It was a country. Uh, 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 um, for you will see her. She's a country without embankments and without any defenses. For if she had been defended by the needful virtue, as were Germany, Spain, and France. Now, again, this is interesting. Germany, and France. Why is this important? Because note 2. Machiavelli remarks that preface to Book 2 of the Discourses that virtue in modern times resides in France and Turkey, the Cephalid, the peoples of and the peoples of Germany, right? He's silent about the virtue residing in Spain. Instead, when we see in chapters 18 and chapter 21, he praises the faithlessness, the ability to give rare examples, and pious cruelty of Ferdinand, right? The comparison to the natures of the people has a significance similar to the composition of the natures of the princes, right? The peoples and the princes seem to be like this. Um, um, Now, what's so interesting is that he blinds out. He doesn't mention Turkey here, but the German cities, right? The German cities are free, armed, and free to the most. The Spain, France. He talked about France in the earlier book. France, Turkey, right? Because they're armed and their capacity. But then what happens here? It's Spain. He talked about the Ferdinand and Ferdinand's activities. How Ferdinand armed her, made her great, made her powerful. Now, therefore, think about this. There's three. These three, he says, as if it were these three, are what they're defended by. They have virtue. Now, Germany is a big problem because there's no Germany. What? Germany doesn't exist like Germany at the time. When he speaks of Germany, he means the Holy Roman Empire, the German people, the German cities. He means the free cities. Mostly, he means really the free cities. He doesn't really mean the emperor. So his example of Germany is a problematic one, and particularly given what will happen with Luther, with the rise of Luther, and the fact that in many ways Germany will find itself very similar, and throughout the history of what will happen, Germany, the next, and this is 16th century, 1500s, right? The 17th century, and the 17th century, the 18th century, and the mid 19th century, the Germany and Italy will have the same problem. There, they don't have a nation. They don't have a nation. The German situation and the Italian situation are somewhat similar, but for some reason he praises the German cities in a way he does not openly praise the cities of Florence. And why does he do that? I think that because he can't praise the Italian cities because they don't have they rely on mercenary arms, or the German cities. So in other words, the difference between the Germans and the German cities and the Italian cities are that they have arms of their own, right? So therefore, they have defended. In other words, where Spain, the Spanish king, had made arms of his own, and the French king has made arms. But then the French king's mistake was to disarm her infantry, and then give rise to this mercenary troops of the Swiss, which then undo them. Okay, so let's think about this now. In other words, this at one level we need to be careful what he says here. But he praises these. These are defended by virtue. If she's defended by the needful virtue, as were Germany, Spain, and France, but the reasons were different. This flood would neither have made the great changes which it has, nor would it have come. Now, I'm sorry, what happens to Italy now very shortly would happen to Germany next. So, so Machiavelli's comment here is true at his time, but we have to be careful because at his time he does not know he is not aware of what is going to happen because of the fact that there's a divided Germany, so divided the church and its influences will corrupt and interfere and destabilize, and that arise a new force within Germany with Luther, and that Luther will unleash a force that destabilizes and becomes a challenger to the existing order, and then therefore this leads to a breakdown of a war that destroys, sets Germans civil strife, the kind of factions that are stronger than the emperor and church factions, that there is division, and that these great changes are to come in the future, right? But he ends the sentence, and I wish that what has been said about opposing fortune to suffice. And I wish that what has been said about opposing fortune to suffice with respect to the general. So, wait a minute. What resisting fortune? How do you prepare for it? You resist it by preparing for it. You're doing it, making your virtue strong, making your virtue. So he says, I want to stop here. I want to stop what I've said about it. We should stop, but he doesn't stop. But restricting myself more to particulars, I say that one may see a prince happy today and ruined tomorrow, without having seen him change his nature or his quality. So, okay, well, here's a problem. that a prince who doesn't change their quality, right? A change who's one time is happy today but ruined tomorrow. And he's what he's not, but he's not without having him seen him change his nature or his qualities. I believe this arises first from the causes which have previously discussed at length. In other words, the discussion of the virtue of the prince, right? The qualities of the prince. The qualities of the prince. The prince has not learned how to be lion and fox. That a fox is too either has either misunderstands and chooses virtue, misunderstood the lessons of the qualities, right? That he doesn't understand that his nature must switch to the time of the circumstances and what he needs must do, right? And that a virtue that does you harm is no virtue, and a vice that does you great benefit or your city great benefit is no vice, right? So again, that's chapter 15, right? Rethinking of chapter 15 and the whole discussion of that third section of the qualities of the prince, right? Um, I believe this arises first from the causes that have been previously discussed at length, and that is that the prince who depends wholly upon fortune falls when she changes. So if you wholly depend on fortune, then you completely fall when it changes. So you've not made any preparations, not made any defenses. This again leads us to discussion of what happened in books 5, I think 5, chapter 5. I mean chapter 5 about the prince who comes because of the arms of others in fortune, right? Um, and the example of Borgia, Cesare Borgia, is a good example of he says here, right? And he makes a bad. And what is Borgia's thing? It's not just bad fortune. He has bad fortune, but what ultimately destroys him is not his bad fortune, but rather a bad choice. All right, that's where we go look at chapter 5 again, and you see it's a bad choice that destroys Caesarea, not a not merely fortune. Yes, like Machiavelli himself, who suffers a malignity of fortune. Caesarea is fortune is not a friend of Caesarea, malignity of fortune, but what that it's that, but even that would not have ultimately undone him. What undid him and led to his failure was, in Machiavelli's presentation of it, was that he promoted Julius to be pope, and Julius was not going to let him keep what he had. Okay, when she changes, I believe. Notice that I believe. Notice I believe. I believe then that he is happy who finds that the mode of his procedures is at one with the qualities of the time, and the similarities that he is unhappy, who who with his procedures is in discord with the times. Notice he doesn't talk about success; he talks about happiness. This is an important shift. This next sentence is depends. He talks about previously. This whole paragraph it's about happy. Well, we think happy means success, but does it? Eudaimonia, right? Eudaimonia in the Greek sense of happiness. That this is a good life. This is the virtuous life. This is that. This has a different notion than being happy, right? But when being happy is happy, but here Prince happy now and ruined tomorrow. So we seem that the prince is happy, but then ruined. Happy one day, but ruined. Happy assumes that he's not ruined, right? You can't be happy if you're not ruined. But does mere happiness mean that you've achieved your goal and you achieved your good? Not necessarily. You could be deceived. You might perceive yourself happy, but your goals have not been achieved. or you may not have the right goals, right? So this shift to happiness is dubious, particularly this last line: "Is he who's happy who finds his mode." The question is not necessarily happiness, but what about success, accomplishing your goal? The goal is: are you able to achieve the good you are aiming at? Now, his argument here is if your mode of procedures are such that you're going to be in, one finds that his procedure is at one with the qualities of the time. Therefore, the qualities of the time and the procedures, if they are suited to each other, or they're what do you call find them. He is happy who finds that the mode of his procedures is at one with the qualities of the time. It's easiest, and that if it's going to be unhappy, the question is he unsuccessful? I think maybe he's being happiness here means the question of successful and unsuccessful, whose his procedures is in discourse with the time. So there's one thing is happy. The other thing is you're in discord, you're going to be unhappy. And possibly unsuccessful. And if you're in concord, does it mean you're going to be successful? We assume it is. So this is the question: does all discord lead to lack of success? Does all concord lead to a success? This is something he's not answered. He just assumes. This is why this is going to be him recommending things here. Maybe we need to think about this. And remember, preparations overall. If you prepared, you can survive bad things, right? So therefore, you can be unhappy with while the bad storm is happening. You're not going to be happy, but you're going to be in a position unlike those who have not prepared. Both you and the other person is not going to be happy that the storm hits. But the one who's prepared is not going to get the negative. Is going to be feeling less bad than the one who's not prepared. Particularly at the end when they see that, and then when at the end of the situation, they see that they've survived and they're in a relatively positive position, that they're not in complete detrimental situation. They can recover and develop. Then they lead that even though they may not be happy with the loss of what they've had and the thing that they've gone through. But then, therefore, there's the possibility that there's still kind of a hope, right? There's something that you can accomplish, and you're able to go have a future where the one who's been destroyed is going to have more difficulty doing that, right? So, therefore, the condition here of concord and not concord to fortune or the times is more problematic than that. In other words, the one who's prepared can survive. The one who is not prepared. That is the lesson of above. But he's ignoring that. He seems to suggest that the argument here seems to present the position that, well, this is a general rule, right? So that we should be careful here if we overemphasize this emphasization of fortune and not fortune, right? For one sees in the things which conduct them to their ends, that each has before him, that is to say, glory and riches. Okay, so they give to the ends, each has before them the end, which leads what the result. In other words, the result of their ends, glory and richness. That men proceed there variously. They proceed there variously. So how do I move to my end? I either one with circumspection and the other impetuosity. So that how do you move? How do you move to your ends? Conduct themselves to the ends that each of them have before them. And these are the results of these ends. These are the end. This is not the whenever the end has these as the results, right? How you proceed towards those ends. So one does it with circumspection, the other does it with impetuous. So again, another list of virtue, another list of characteristics. One by violence, the other art. One with patience, the other its contrary. So again, like circumspection, but patience versus impetuosity. Again, this kind of repeats it. And each one with these diverse modes is able to arrive there. So in other words, these different modes allow you to go there and go there. So in other words, all these good and bad ways can lead you to success, lead you to get your end. The question is how effective they will be, how successful or lack of successfulness will be. They can get you there, but the context and the things, again, this is where this is where maybe fortune plays the role, or things beyond your, in other words, the times, the situation, the context matters here. One might again see two cautious men. One arrives to his purpose while the other does not, and similarly, two prosper equally with two diverse plans. In other words, one does it this way, one does it this way, but they both get it right. One being cautious and the other impetuous. All of which arises from nothing other than their procedure, which does or does not conform to the quality of the times. He's saying the quality of times means the environment of the situation, the context of the situation that is being done. In other words, does the right mode, is it suit does it fit the situation? If it fits the situation, but what happens if even more problematic? This at one level it seems to suggest the mode and the situation is the only criteria. But what happens to personality? What happens if this person is perpetual? In other words, this person who's perpetual, he might get, in other words, that the situation may not be good, he might lose. Remember the example of how other forces may be at play. The context was bad. It was a bad, Julius's reliance on this, and that the Spanish were going to help him doing this to do this great project against the Venetians, I think. Um, uh, uh, um, and then what happens is that it it only achieves its end when how, but because this, not because they the papal forces win, they lose. It's only when, because of the Swiss revolting and switching sides against the French, the winner, the one who kind of won the battle, does the battle swift to force the French to flee. Right? So we have to look at this more carefully. At one level, there's two plans. One succeeds, one doesn't. But wait a minute. Are the plans the same situation? Same context? If it is the same context, the same moment, two plans, and the two things, there must be, in other words, the things, the context of the plans must be, or the matter in question have to be completely different. But he says that similarly, two prosper equally with two different plans. The question is, are the things that they're achieving different or the same plan? Okay, that's the problem, right? In the same setting. What does Machiavelli say about it? He doesn't. He's just presenting it, saying that there's many different changes. Therefore, you should pay attention to fortune. From which arises what I've said, that two working diversely get the same effect. And of the two working similarly, one conducts himself to the end and one does not. So it's in other words, he has a weird situation here. In other words, two different people both get the same effect. Two working similarly, one gets it, but one doesn't. So this seems arbitrary. This seems random. At one appearance, everything looks like okay. That maybe the choice you make, the choice, the effect, and the mode you choose, the mode of your perpetuosity, is arbitrary or has no real impact on this. It's like maybe like fortune. So we get the perception that this arbitrary, but is it? It's not. In other words, we're taking at surface value something that perhaps maybe we shouldn't take at surface value. Upon this, does the good vary? In other words, upon this situation, the good varies. For if one governs himself with caution and patience, and the times and circumstances turn in such a mode that his government is good, then he goes on happily. But if the times and circumstances change, he fails because he does not change the mode of his procedure. So, in other words, remember, you have to be able to go back. The prince is able to adjust his mode. He can change his mode of procedure, impetuosity. In other words, remember those modes of procedures that he did, the six modes. Where actually five. One is just kind of a returning of the other mode. And there's to what degree is circumspection and the other imposity, violence and art, one with patience. How is this not circumspection? And impatience, and the contrary, impatience. How is not impatience impetuosity? But they seem to be a little different in that. There seems to be again, that reminds me of the difference between um, um, niggardliness or um, being tight, stinginess in the fifth chapter 15, where he uses the word avro and misero, right? Because he gives two test. Italian word is too rapacious, so he chooses the Tuscan word, right, to deal with the stingy, right? Why? This reminds me of that in that sense. He's, but back over here, we're left with that weird ending here. In other words, we don't know the procedures. In other words, he's not going to be happy. He falls behind. He does not change the mode of procedure. Nor can one find a man so prudent that he would know how to accommodate himself to this. So no man is so prudent. So therefore, he seems to deny that there's prudence possible. Here he makes the argument that no man is so prudent that he can accommodate to this thing, have the nature of being able to know to alter his mode in order to do that. The modes are too fit. People just too fit in habits. Your habits have changed such that you're going to default into your habit. No one is so prudent that they would know how to accommodate himself to this. That comes about because he is unable to deviate from that to which nature has inclined him. So nature inclines you to a certain way, and because that nature inclines you, and you can't change. But we can change. You can have habit. In other words, you can be trained. In other words, if you relying on nature and one's own nature is to kind of rely on one's fortune in a certain way. So therefore, by the preparations of this is to conquer nature in a certain way. To conquer fortune by preparation, nature can be also altered by preparations. So we can, through our habits and our education, we can correct for errors in nature, right? We can correct for nature's errors in natures. So the statement that because he is unable to deviate from what nature inclines him, and also because he who has always prospered walking along one way cannot be persuaded to depart from it. So therefore, he's using this idea that people who work one way in nature can't be persuaded. But we know that's not true. We know people who can, you have addiction to something, right? If you can be, there you can fight it. You can do habits and things to fight your bad behavior. Now it's hard, right? It takes effort and power, but it's still possible. Okay, it's not impossible. It takes great effort, innovation, technology. So to challenge nature. Now, this is the point. He brings now from fortune to nature. So this is important. This is why Machiavelli is we can argue that that uh, the modern science, Bacon will look at Machiavelli and say, well, man must conquer nature to alleviate the human condition, alleviate man's estate. This is technology. This is the modern science, modern science. That man must not know. In other words, the purpose of knowledge is not knowing, but it is to know to change nature, not to know nature, but to know nature in order to change, allow men to change it to get their betterment over it. Right? That's Bacon. And I think this is Machiavelli seems to be suggesting the same thing here. That he is, in other words, he is unable to deviate it from nature appliance. That because he is always prospered, walking along one way, cannot be persuaded to depart from it. Yeah, persuaded, but if he knows that do that will lead to his disaster, wouldn't his interest lead him to cheat education or habits that will lead him to that? It's hard. It's not easy. But he never said it was going to be easy, right? Um, and therefore, a cautious man, when it's time to be impetuous, does not know how to do it. Whence he is ruined. So therefore, the first one is that the man who is cautious, always cautious, but now he needs to be impetuous. He doesn't know how to. If he can't just become impetuous, if he just keeps within his nature, he will be ruined. So if he merely accommodates his own nature, not able to change his nature to to get the maximum benefit of the situation, he would be ruined. For if he changed his nature with the times and the circumstances, fortunes would not change. Now, this is a weird thing. He says fortune does not change. That if man is able to change his nature, in other words, for if he changed his nature with the times and the circumstances, he would succeed. That was fortune is for here is a weird thing. How is it weird? It's going to be for, right? Uh, this is 25. Note 3. Sorry, 3. This is the Discourses, Book 3, Chapter 9. See the discussion of about on the modes of men. In other words, the modes of men, the men's modes. This discussion of modes, human modes. Now, de Alvarez talks about this in his introduction. Um, um, let's see, where is the mode of men? Hold on, sorry. I apologize. Chapter 25, with the introduction. It doesn't have the introduction of these. In the introduction of these passages, discussion in the modes of these passages in the mode of men. So 25, yeah, this is moment. So it's his whole point in the introduction about this is about the difficulty of it has how it happens. In other words, the roll of fortune here is a very difficult thing in that sense. Um, I would leave it to that, and I'm not going to go spend more time checking in it. In other words, if he changes nature, times would do this and change fortune would not change. That means he means success. He would be successful. In other words, but how would fortune change it? In other words, fortune does not change. In other words, fortune would not change. What I mean, he'd be what if he'd be ruined? A cautious man would not know how to do it. For if he had changed his nature at times, fortune would not change. So if he changed, what is the fortune here? Is fortune never going to do it? The cautious man will win. And if the cautious man, when his time became, he didn't know how to do it, right? Hence, he is ruined. It says, but if he changes nature with the certain times, fortune would not change. Well, it doesn't matter. He would still succeed. He would succeed. He would change his fortune. Fortune doesn't change, but he would change his fortune. He would be the master, not fortune, right? That would be the logic of what if we look at if we argue with the text here a little bit, we see this. Now, the next chapter, he brings up Pope Julius II, right? The Pope, the warrior Pope, right? The one that Cesare Borgia made. Proceeded impetuously in every one of his affairs. And he found the times and circumstances very much in conformity with his procedure, which always resulted in the happy end. In other words, he just went through it and did it. But even the case of I'm sorry, he was double lucky. He was, in other words, it wasn't that the situation was that his time was that he gets lucky by the bad governance of the French by not paying the Swiss mercenaries. This leads the Swiss mercenaries to switch sides, right? It's this is fortune in that sense. So his impetuosity wasn't his impetuosity in the times and circumstances, but rather an extraordinary event that really was not even tied to the circumstances and time in that sense. Well, maybe the circumstances in the bad governments, but in that war, that battle, the battle was the French defeated the forces. The French initially won the battle, but only lost it when the Swiss arms switched sides. Right. So so therefore, that in other words, he always succeeded because of this sense, right? Consider the first enterprise he undertook, that of the Bologna, and while Giovanni Bentigovoni was still living, in other words, the um, who's Bentigovoni? Hold on, 5. This is the first campaign of Julius V. When it astonished Christendom, we saw a pope act like a warrior king. It was during the same campaign that he confronted Giovanni Baligio in Persia. Um, um, so therefore, this is this idea that Genie was still living in that sense. That this person's was still living at this time, and he undertook this great example. Right, the king was the warrior; he fought in armed battle. The Pope did. The Venetians were not pleased with it, and neither was the King of Spain. he was still negotiating with France over that enterprise. And nevertheless, with his ferocity and impetuosity, he personally put that expedition into motion. So, therefore, in other words, that all these powers, uh, 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 um, 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 uh, and while he was still negotiating with France over the enterprise, he nevertheless, with his ferocity in this, he personally put that expedition in motion, right? That motion made Spain and the Venetians stand suspended and arrested. The latter from fear, and the former from a desire to recover all of the kingdom of Naples. So, the in other words, this out of fear, Venetians out of fear, but the Spain thought I'd gain something, right? And on the other side, he pulled in behind him the king of France, because the king, having seen him move and desired to make him friendly in order to bring down the Venetians, judged that he was not able to deny the Pope his troops without manifestly offending him. So again, luck. In other words, he picked the time. It was the right thing. Acting perpetually, he did it. He moved it. Again, this is a case of luck. Seems to be on his side. That the if it, in other words, no, this is the hilarious. This is the example here. If you look at this thing, oh, wait, if maybe someone decided that, you know, if someone acted other than they did, maybe that they could have stopped it. But no. Julius conducted then with his impetuous motion that which another pontiff, with all human prudence, would never have conducted. So therefore, no other he conducted with his impetuosity what no other pontiff could, with all human prudence, would never have conducted. For if he had waited to depart Rome with the agreements firmly conducted, and all things ordained, as any other pontiff would have done, he would never have succeeded. But the kingdom of France would have had thousands of excuses, and the others would have put him into 1,000 fears. In other words, in other words, only after beginning the enterprise, the he said, I want to get, I want to be part of this. In other words, that if he had waited for them to act, no, but by his acting, he forced them to act. So that's interesting in that sense. That we have to understand that he would never have succeeded if he required them to act, because they would have not. They would have never done it. The kingdom of France would have 1,000 uses not to do it, not to act, because the others, Spain, Spain and particularly Venice. Venice would go after Milan, right? They could have went after Milan, and that would have put thousands of fears, right? I wish to let stand his other actions, which are all the same, and all of which succeeded well for him. Okay, and the brevity of his life did not let him feel the contrary. In other words, he did all his life. He never felt the negative impact of that thing. For if times had come which would have made him need to proceed with care, his ruin would have followed. In other words, Machiavelli seems to suggest that it's his ruin. But I am, to what degree does, okay, Machiavelli here asserts that the pontiff's impetuosity was his nature. And we are forced to see that because only during the time of his life we only see that. But then if you look at his earlier time, as a cardinal, if you look at his life earlier, he survived the Borgias. He was able to manipulate the Borgias. He manipulated the Borgias. He manipulated Chevalier to choose him. Is that impetuosity or is that cunning? Is Julius as much a lion and a fox? The impetuous lion, we think, right? But is he also the cunning fox? So this is the problem of this. This is why we have to rethink the Julius example carefully, because at one thing it looks like he's always fortune, always fortune, always fortune. And yes, he gets into power by what? Well, he takes over the arms that, in other words, he took control over the project of Alexander. And unlike Alexander, who used his son as the warrior, Julius, having no son and not trusting, letting others do it, did it himself. Remember, the whole point was, and the count is, it was Caesarea was more an instrument of Alexander in the previous section things than a prince in that sense. Whereas Julius is both becomes he's the prince who then takes the battlefield. He does exactly what a prince. Alexander never goes to the battlefield, right? He never leads his troops. He does not do what a prince ought to do. Whereas Julius does what a prince ought to do. And in other words, but Machiavelli ends with this that the change. If you've lived longer, he would have never deviated from those modes to which nature inclined him, and therefore he would have come to this ruin. But are we sure about that? Machiavelli seems to suggest that we can't change our natures, and that therefore this becomes at one level the perception that fortune is really that we have to have this agreement between circumstance and this. Well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's a deception on Machiavelli's part to start believing in the omnipotence of nature and the omnipotence of fortune. But then in the last paragraph, he shocks us. He now in the first sentence, he makes a general statement that kind of reaffirms something he said earlier about happiness and being in concord with the times, being in concord with the conditions and times. It will make you happy in discourse to conquer a time. A couple paragraphs ahead, he now changes. I conclude that then that with fortune varying and men standing obstinate in their modes, so that fortune varies and men stand obstinate in modes, and when these are in concord with each other, men are happy, they're pleased, they'll be successful, and when they're in discord, unhappy. But he doesn't use success and unhappy. He just uses the metaphor of happy and not happy. And we have to remember that someone can be successful and not necessarily happy. Someone who may think that the success, I would have preferred a better success. Okay, you get a successful situation, and in other words, so therefore, this is a weird situation. He gives this metaphor. If you're in concord with fortune, you're happy, and if you discord in fortune, you're unhappy, right? But then, what does he tell you to do? I am very much of this judgment, that it is better to be impetuous than cautious. For fortune is a woman, and if one wishes to keep her down, it is necessary to beat her and knock her down. And one sees that she lets herself be overcome more by these men than by those who proceed coldly. And therefore, like a woman, she is always the friend of the young, because they are less cautious, are fiercer, and with more audacity, they do command her, right? Now, de Alvarez talks about fortune and talks about discourses 1, chapter 34, through book 3 at 8. Book 8, 9, 31, and 33, right? There's an expanded discussion of fortune in the discourses. But here, Machiavelli ends this chapter on fortune by making this accusation. It's better to be impetuous than cautious. Because for an argument of analogy, that fortune is like a woman. And you notice, women like, the ones who aggressively get their way with them. The woman likes the bad boys. Women likes the bad boys. This is very hell. I knew someone. I know the political theorist who, reading this at the Naval War College about almost 2 decades ago, uh, uh, got basically sexual harassment. Oh my God, he said something that was alignment of hostile workplace environment. I mean, the guy, I think he was basically kicked out of the Naval War College. It was a news story. I mean, it was even, I heard about it even over here. The news story was in the local news. Oh my God, someone said, he said this horrible thing about reading the frigging prints. It reminds me of the story of George Anastopoulos reading the Declaration, or the Declaration talks about the Indians as savages, right? And therefore, students complained that Anastopoulos talked about the Indians as savages, and therefore was racist. Anyone who knew George Anastopoulos knew what ridiculous that was. In fact, George had this was like in the 90s when this happened at the law school. I tried to remove him. He wrote this multiple length, two or three law review articles with ABCs of political, responding to this charge that he was racist. This is at the beginning of political correctness, and they tried to cancel him. In fact, they eventually they ultimately did it. The law school, if I remember correctly, is that they created a new section on constitutional law, so students would not have to take him for constitutional law. So anyone who knew Anastopoulos was horrified by this situation. But they tried to make his life miserable. They tried to get rid of him, but he wouldn't go. And he's a man who spent his whole life doing almost like a Socrates character. They call him Socrates Chicago. But this is the funny part. This ending here is a very shocking ending. But he advises you to what? Are you going to be happy? You're going to be in discord. I'm sorry. You do this, you're not going to be in concord with nature. You beat her and you win her. You conquer nature, you conquer fortune, and you conquer nature. But you're not going to be happy. Bye-bye happiness. Happiness cannot be a concern. Success is our only concern. Because why? You're in struggle. You won't be happy. This is how I end it. Now, also, we have to be careful. Notice what happens here. What has happened here? A rape. He basically, the image is of a rape. The image here is of a rape, a physical rape. But what happens? Well, the rape here is a physical beating and like this, but then there isn't kind of an orgy, because not only are you doing it, not only is Machiavelli saying to do it, he's recommending that you do it as well, that we do it. I conclude be happier. I'm very much of this judgment. That it's better to be, so I'm judgment. He's advocating that you go do it. Go do this. Take it. Fortune is woman. So you want to keep her down, beat her. Take her. So that's the danger of, this is the point, that the use of the metaphor here, and this is why this is a very sensitive thing. Oh my God, we can probably get this channel canceled because of this metaphor here, because someone complains about it. But this is the danger of the ending here. There is a sexual act, and what happens with a sexual? When there's a sexual act, even though it's a violent sexual act, there is also release. Someone gets enjoyment from it. Maybe not the victim, but the other guy gets some release from this, and that sexual release is what we see in the next chapter. So let's stop here, and we'll hold off, and we will look at the next chapter 26, which is about what? It's about the exhortation. Now, 26 ends the prince, and it ends it on an exhortation, which is completely different in character of the rest of the prince. We get an exhortation. Okay. So let's stop here. I'm not going to talk about this in 26, but we'll talk about the exhortation. We'll go into 26 next time we meet. So if you like the video, hit the like button. Hit the like button. It helps the video. It helps the algorithm. If you have any comments or questions, please input the comments and questions down, and I'll respond to them. Engagement helps the algorithm and all these things. So please put your comment. Again, hit the like button. If you liked it, share it. Share the video far and wide. Share it on your social media. Share it on your email. Just bring it to attention of others. Also, if you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing. All these things: subscribing, sharing, commenting, liking, all are impacts on the algorithm. Another thing you can do is you can encourage others to come check the channel out. Come to encourage your friends to go check the channel out. That's why I share the things with videos. But also, you should come to check the channel out. Check out the previous videos on Machiavelli, but also the prints that we've done. But also check the other videos that I've done on the different series that we covered here. If you didn't like it, you thought somebody didn't like it. Again, likewise, please put a comment on what is your gripe. What I did wrong, what I said wrong, and maybe you disagree with. I'm like, how dare you talk about that thing, right? Again, this is a very conscious. I should have had a trigger warning at the beginning. A trigger warning at the beginning of the chapter 25. So that's it. The next thing we do is you want to follow me on social media. Check out my social media links below. The URLs to the various social media platforms and my presence there. Another thing you can do is you can check me as a scholar, check me as a researcher, check out my research and my academic activities. You can do so through the academic social media that's beneath the social media, and then the URLs to those different academic social media sites or my presence there. And then the next but not least is you want to help me to do what I do. You can do so by being a Patreon or Subscribe Star through the URLs to Patreon and Subscribe Star. Or you can just basically buy one of my books in the process. My current available books are listed below, and you can order it either on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Okay, first you order it at your local bookstore, or you can order it through an online distributor such as Barnes and Noble, Amazon, A&E, ABE Books, and Libris, or similar things. Or you can order it directly by the publisher. Well, that's it. We finish the prints next time. So take care and have a nice day. Bye-bye.